everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Independent Thought. My name is Desmond Price. For today's episode, I'm joined by Madhuri Prabhakar, the microplastics campaigner for the Plastic Soup Foundation. How are you doing today? Thank you for coming on the show.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm doing good. It's morning where I am. So yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, so we were kind of joking before the episode started. We have a 8 hour time difference between Missoula, Montana, and Amsterdam, so it is quite the difference in timing here where I'm at over here in the United States. But we're going to make this episode work. The first thing I want to ask you about, what exactly is the Plastic Soup Foundation, and what are some of the projects that you're currently working on?
Plastic Soup Foundation is a very small nonprofit organization. It's only a decade old. Yes, a
Yeah.
decade is a very small time for an NGO for our size existing. And we're a single issue organization. That means our sole focus is to fight plastic pollution. And yeah, we're based in Amsterdam. We have a very small team of 22 people. And our focus is to plastic pollution from all directions.
You know, I was trying to put together there were so many questions I had about plastic pollution. I felt like I probably could have talked to you for hours on end. Just thinking about all the different effects it has in our environment, so on and so forth. And on Independent Thought here, I haven't had an episode centered around the environment in a while now. But I guess just kind of trying to focus down or narrow it down a little bit. Let me just start with this really quickly. Uh, when it comes to the number one focus of your foundation right now, what is it that you're trying to accomplish, I guess, on a day-to-day basis, or maybe or in the interim right now? What's the current focus for Plastic Soup and how you're trying to address this plastic pollution crisis that we're facing?
When we started 10, 12 years ago, it was really about spreading the awareness. It really felt like a lot of people were not aware of the fact, the extent of damage plastic waste and is doing to not only our environment and how much it is polluting. So we started with the awareness of it all, but as we grew older, the focus was more and more on really tackling this problem at the source because, of course, there's a lot of cleanups happening and there's a lot of people going out there cleaning their streets, beaches. And at some point, we realized that we can't keep doing that when the tap is still open. The
Right.
plastic pollution tap is still open. And we can't keep just cleaning up beaches when we are not really focusing at the start of this tap. And there's no point cleaning up a floor when the tap is running. And that's where we realized that we really need to tackle it at the source. And that's been our focus for a while now. We're trying to really reduce plastic production and pollution at its source. Um, and yeah, cleanups are really good for awareness and it's necessary for to an extent, but we really need to focus on stop producing so much plastic. The global plastic production really doubled in the past 2 decades, and it reached 460 million tons. Uh,
Wow.
and the forecast is that by 2025, which is not that far away, we're going to double this number. So the production is really soaring. And how can we solve this problem without actually looking at this production and what's necessary and what's unnecessary? So that's our focus at the point at this moment.
Sometimes it almost seems unbelievable, almost like you can't really conceptualize just how much it really is.
Hmm.
I know
Hmm.
that I have that problem sometimes. And when I was trying to gear up to ask you to come on this episode and to actually have this conversation with you, I was looking at a bunch of statistics myself. But for you, someone who's in this on a day in and day out basis, what are some of the stats that you come across that I guess even for you kind of catch you off guard and maybe the average person wouldn't know this figure about the plastic pollution that we're dealing with?
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. It can be just overwhelming, and at some point, just big numbers that you can't visualize. It doesn't mean anything to you, like billion tons or million tons. It
Right.
it is hard to visualize. So uh, there are facts out there that's gonna hit you because it has boiled down to, for example, 1 million plastic bottles are sold every minute,
Wow.
every single minute. 2 million plastic bags are sold every single minute. So we're talking in minutes now. And it's, if you can even visualize what 1 million bottles look like, plastic bottles, um, every minute of every day, we are dumping 1 truckload of plastic in the oceans. So just let that sink in. Um, and of course, there are initiatives right now that are cleaning up the oceans. What This fact hit me really hard, personally, because only 1% of trash is actually floating on the ocean.
Right. I saw that.
99% of it sinks down. So what we're cleaning up is 1% of this pollution problem.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that one really hit me hard. I was like, wow. So even if we are going out there and cleaning our oceans, we're just solving such tiny part of this problem. The rest is just on the ocean floor and polluting the marine life. So yeah.
It seems as though when the problem's so far away, because they have this, I mean, what you refer
Hmm.
to like the plastic soup, right? It being this giant island in the Pacific Ocean, just a giant like country size amount of trash that
Yeah.
it feels so detached from like our like Western nations that we live in, that people just don't seem to really care. Like, let's just call it what it is. People don't
Hmm.
really seem to care, but so much of that stuff is what single-use plastics, right? Now, you had mentioned to
Hmm.
me that one of the things that you and your organization are trying to accomplish right now is trying to lobby the EU to ban single-use plastics, microplastics, for
Hmm.
instance. What exactly does that look like? Sometimes we hear about these things happening in an abstract sense. Oh, we're trying to lobby, this government to do this thing, but what does that look like, and how has that been going so far?
In terms of single-use plastic, I would say we're in a right direction and it's going well. Well, I started working at Plastic Soup Foundation about 6 years ago, and in the
Yeah.
time frame that I have been working at the Plastic Soup Foundation, the awareness and the initiatives popping around the world banning single-use plastic have soared. So that has been very good to experience. That of course there is awareness and there's legislative initiatives happening around the world. So in EU and in 2020, I think the EU came with single-use plastics directive. So it just gives a directive to all the European countries where they should ban certain plastic products like straws or cotton buds and plastic cutlery, those kind of things. But it's just a directive, and the different member states need to take it upon themselves to then turn it into laws and put them out in each of the countries. Um, but the whole process has been very fragmented for us, as in we had to focus on different things. One
Yeah.
of those things was to get deposit return schemes. I'm not sure if how familiar that term is, uh, but deposit return schemes are systems where you can bring back your plastic bottle and get
Mm,
a little money for it.
okay.
So there is value on that trash, uh, So you can go to the supermarkets here, and there are machines where you can submit your plastic bottles, and it gives you a couple of cents per bottle. So you save those bottles and submit it there, so they don't end up as trash and litter. Um, Initially, those deposit return schemes were only on big plastic bottles, and now with our campaigning efforts, it's also on small plastic bottles and also on cans. And these are small plastic bottles and cans can really they were a big trash and litter problem here. Um, and what we did is, I'm not sure. Do you know about World Cleanup Day?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
World Cleanup Day is also like this big initiative that is worldwide. Everybody goes out there on this one particular day, a Saturday in September, and they clean up their streets and whatever their environment. And we organized that initiative here in the Netherlands. And what we encouraged people is to really collect the data of what they're picking up. So what kind of trash it is, what kind of brands that it is. So that data was really valuable in bringing these deposit return schemes into place,
Yeah.
because there we can really hold the polluters accountable, but also the government, to show where the problem lies and what needs to be done. So it kind of started with those kind of initiatives, and then now on EU level there is this directive. So uh, it's definitely not perfect, and there's so many loopholes in there, but we're certainly headed to a right direction, so to speak. And I really hope in the future um, it will become more future proof and a bit more tight.
You know, it's hard for me to imagine that it's gotten this bad, but it also isn't. And
Mm.
I'm actually going to get into why I feel like that a little bit later in this conversation. But before I get into all the cynicism that I have around, how these things happen in the first place, let me try to talk about the future a little bit. Obviously, one of two things has to change, and one of them seems a little more harder than the other. The harder one would be we
Hmm.
have to completely rethink our entire global lifestyle,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
get rid of things like single-use plastics, microplastics. That feels a little more lofty. Uh, the other one seems to be to replace plastics with something that degrades at a faster pace and is not as dangerous for the environment, something like bamboo, something like hemp, for
Mm.
instance. Are there, when you're thinking about lobbying governments, for instance, or putting out factoids, from your organization, do you promote things like that, or what is the thought process around like other products like that from Plastic Soup's perspective?
Hmm. Well, as you just said, we really need to look at the system and how it's working at the moment. And
Yeah.
um, 44% of plastic is used for packaging, and that packaging is often single use. Um, so if we really zoom out here, I don't think it's that we can replace one material with other. And of course, hemp or paper would be better alternative in terms of biodegradability. But if we really zoom out, it's really about resource and uh, the resources other materials would take to be produced on such a scale. I remember one time a colleague, I don't remember exactly where he said it, but he said, "We live, hence we are unsustainable." That was, yeah, it's too deep. I'll just drop it here. But that line was also something that struck with me to this day, because
Yeah.
it's kind of true, because we are just so many, and the amount and sheer uh, scales of things that we would have to put in to replace any system is gonna take some toll on the resources of our planet, because uh, the way we are living in a throwaway convenience culture. So everything is related to convenience and what can be used quick and throw quick, instead of really thinking about um, creating less waste. So we can replace the plastic with other materials, but that doesn't mean that it would create less waste, you know?
Mm.
Um, so the really the point here is to reduce, that would be the solution, to really reduce the amount of stuff we're putting out there, and the usability of materials and life cycles of material. Half of the plastic that we use is thrown away within a month, or single-use plastics are used for 15 minutes for an average. So that's
Right.
the amount of waste generated is not going to be reduced if we just replace the material. So the future is, I think, reuse. We need to think of reusable materials, and it just doesn't need to only come from consumers. You can, of course, take your own reusable bottle or cup, but that's not going to solve the problem at a large
At
scale.
scale.
So we really need to, um, yeah, the businesses needs to bring in reusable materials, and that you should be able to buy the content and not the packaging. The packaging should be reusable, and that you bring it back, and there are deposit return schemes, and that you pay a little bit of money for the container, and you bring it back, and then you get the money back when the container is up, for example. Uh, so yeah, it really, if you really look back, it's about reducing and reusing. Then merely replacing materials and just continue the way we're living at yeah, with convenience, and throw away living. That's just not gonna bode well with our resources, and we don't have infinite resources on our planet. So yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it seems like the only logical way out of this. But then I know, especially living in the country that I live in, it feels like there is
Hmm.
a large section of my country who just feels as though that they're entitled to do basically whatever they want, however they want, whenever they want, and the consequences be damned. So
Hmm.
I think America's part of the problem here. But with that being said, we're going to take a quick break. But before we do, I want to say when we come back, we're going to be talking about not just the damages that plastic pollution is having on the environment, but how it's infecting people in their own bodies, what that is like, and how it's in brands, even like our cosmetics, which you
Hmm.
are a wow, I just blanked here. Oh my
Could say
God.
expert.
I was gonna say. All right, I'll have to, obviously my first time having to cut something here in the episode, which you are an expert in. We'll be right back. Welcome back from the break, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us through this episode of Independent Thought. So before we went on the break, I had mentioned that I wanted to talk about the effects of plastics getting into your body, which is something that we probably don't want to think about, but that's kind of the point of this whole episode. We are not thinking enough about how plastic is essentially in a really poignant way penetrating every part of our lives, including our bodies. So that's the next thing I kind of want to bring to the forefront here. What are some of the effects of having microplastics, I guess, in our bodies? And do we really have a full understanding of how these things impact us over time?
Well, as you said before, a lot of people think that this is not their problem because,
Yeah.
the pollution exists in the ocean. There's some turtle dying. You don't know that turtle, so it doesn't bother you, right? But it's not just the turtle. It's you, and it's coming
Yeah.
closer and closer to us. Uh, it's all, if you really take a moment and look around living room and your house in general, just notice the amount of things that are made with plastic, and it will already be a very confronting moment, I think. So it's not just the ocean and it's not just the marine life, it's really close to us. We are surrounded by plastic.
Yeah.
So it's not a surprise that we are also infiltrated by it, right? The entire food chain is infiltrated by it. We are part of the food chain. It's all around us. It's in the air that we breathe. It's in the water that we drink. It's in the food that we eat. So it's everywhere. So yeah, recently in the past couple of years, there has been also an upsurge of uh, research that's done on plastics and humans. And plastics have been found in human blood, human lungs, in the placenta of the unborn baby.
Wow.
So our bodies are really polluted with plastics already. What they actually do in our body, that's something the research is growing on. But there's already indications that the chemicals that are used in plastic, the additives, they have a connection to a number of serious health problems, such as hormone-related cancers, infertility, neurodevelopment disorders in like ADHD and autism. And of course, fetuses and children are considered particularly at risk because these hormones play a very vital role in their development.
Yeah.
So uh, we are completely polluted, and there are so many of these diseases that, yeah, point towards the chemicals that we are exposed to via plastics also.
Now, what are the things that you told me that you were kind of like an expert on, or that you spent a lot of time, I guess, investigating, is the connection between microplastics and cosmetics? I guess before we
Mhm.
get into specifics on that, just first tell me, because when you told me that, I was kind of like a little caught off guard. I mean, I don't use a lot of cosmetics myself, but
Mhm.
I was still taken aback by the idea. I was like, why are there plastics in cosmetics? Can you talk about that first before we get into like kind of like some more of the effects of that?
Um, well, a lot of people when I start talking to them about uh what do I do for a living, and then I
Yeah.
mention like, oh yeah, I'm a microplastics campaigner, and my campaign is about plastics in cosmetics, and they were like, oh yeah, cosmetics as in yeah, the packaging, of course, it's like yeah, it's a problem, right? And then I go like, no, it's not really the packaging, it's really inside of the products, and it really always takes everybody a moment to realize that they're intentionally put plastics inside our cosmetics, not the packaging, the content of it. And yeah, but the name of my campaign is Beat the Microbeat. When we
Yeah.
first started this campaign, the focus was really on microbeads. And these are these spheres, spherical little pieces of plastics that are put in our scrubs and toothpaste and stuff to exfoliate our skin or any surface. Uh, but again, with our research and with other research developing, we got to know that it's not just those little pieces of plastic, but it's all other kinds of different plastics that are put inside the product. And there are not only these five kinds of ingredients, but there could be, at the stage we are screening, 1,100 ingredients that we see as potentially microplastics put into our cosmetic products. Um, and they're put there because they're cheap. You know, plastics are always cheap. That's one advantage, so to speak, for plastics. They also have some sort of functions in there, for example, as emulsifiers or waterproofing, maybe making products feel soft on your skin, so and so on. So, yeah, they're used widely in all kinds of cosmetic products that you can imagine, whether it's your toothpaste, your deodorant, your shampoo, your makeup, your lipsticks, your makeup, everything
Oh
you
my
can
God.
imagine.
Yeah. I guess I'm trying to have a moment here where I'm not trying to freak out about it and thinking about how much I take in all the time, but let's get a little bit more information about this. If I were to
Mhm.
go into a bathroom right now and kind of like look through the different things that like I or my partner might have in there, what are some of the products that I guess have the highest like concentrations or products that maybe have like a higher amount of microplastics than some of the others?
Yeah, I think that's a very hard question to answer because I'm not sure if there's one product category that has more than the other, but it really depends on the brand, I would say,
Okay.
and their formulas, so to speak. So that really varies from brand to brand and product to product. For example, like a face wash could have one plastic ingredient, but could also have like six. So it really depends on on the brand. Um, but what I notice, and this might be just my personal observation, is that makeup products tend to have more plastic ingredients than, for example, a body cream
Hmm.
or a shampoo, in my experience.
So
Yeah.
your company developed an app in order to kind of like, I guess, scan barcodes and people can kind of figure out how much plastic, I guess, is in a particular product. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we came up with this app in 2020, I think, and it scanned the ingredients of your cosmetic products and all kinds of cosmetic products. And it tells you which of those ingredients are plastics and how much plastic is in there. And we came up with this app because even I feel overwhelmed with this long list of plastics that can be found in cosmetic products. And there is no way you can humanly remember all of those. Even I can't. And I work with this almost every day, and I have to always go back to my lists and check if that's correct because it's just so much. And you can feel very old. So we wanted to make it easy for consumers, and the app does the work for you. It remembers all the ingredients for you. All you need to do is take a simple picture of the back of your product where the ingredients are, and the app does the work, and it tells you instantly what ingredients are plastic. So it's an easy way, it's an easy tool that we provide to consumers so they can make an informed decision while buying cosmetic and personal care products. Um, And it's free to download, so because we want this to be accessible to everybody.
Well, it sounds like something I'll have to be adding into the episode description so that people can check it out when they're checking out this episode. That's just a little bit of a foreshadow here. But hey, I think when it comes to all this stuff, overwhelmed is definitely the right word, because
Hmm.
I know that I feel that way. And I'm somebody who I go out of my way to be politically engaged in several different fashions. But a lot of people, just to call it for what it is, they're politically adverse, or they try to stay away from topics like this as much as humanly possible. You have the day-to-day lives that people have going on, just struggling to survive. People try to have
Hmm.
tunnel vision sometimes and just block out all the rest of this stuff because they're like, I don't know what to do about this. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And they just shut down. And I don't blame them, because
Hmm.
in a lot of cases, we can get into a litany of different things here, but our society has multiple different oppressive forces coming at us at all times, right? So, speaking to that mentality, I guess, what are some of the ways that I guess people can maybe in some small way, or maybe in I guess a less complicated way, can go and find ways to eliminate, the plastic, I guess, unnecessary plastic uses in their lives, or find ways to reduce plastic consumption? Do you have any tips and tricks for people how they can reduce their plastic intake?
Well, yeah, overwhelming is the right word, and I agree with you. We can't blame people for being overwhelmed with the sheer things that's happening related to just this topic, pollution, and then there's a
Yeah.
whole lot of other things that needs to be taken care of. So it is very overwhelming to live in this world with all of these issues. But my advice or suggestion would be to keep it small and keep it where you can have most impact. And just because using plastics and convenience of plastics is also a matter of habit, and it's something that you need to unlearn and develop other habits, like always bringing a reusable bag. I what I have done is I have put a reusable bag in all of my purses and backpacks, so I never forget it in a way,
Yeah.
and that helps. And sometimes I do forget it, and then I'm carrying all my groceries in my hands like this. But that's just my commitment to it, I guess. Never using a plastic bag again, but or carrying a water bottle always with you. You don't have to buy single-use plastic bottles. Uh, or carrying a to-go cup when you're getting a coffee. And these kind of habits we need to develop. And slowly, if only we start with these three little things, then it will all become a bit more possible for you. Because, yeah, it will be hard at the beginning and you'll forget. And you need to be kind to yourself to make mistakes every now and then, but it's really about doing it imperfectly and not perfectly. Because if all of us, billions of people on this planet, are doing it imperfectly, it's much better to do that than one person doing a perfect job in not ever using any piece of plastic again. Uh, so yeah, that would be my advice.
It I think the thing that really hits home for me is, I think in order to really address this, people have to see themselves as part of a collective, right?
Hmm.
I think too
Exactly.
often we think of ourselves as individuals only, as if we're not sharing this planet with each other, as if our actions
Hmm.
don't have effects on other people. It's really the same thing that really ties into the climate crisis overall. And when you
Hmm.
and I were talking originally, we were talking about how the plastic, I guess, plastic pollution crisis is also directly tied to the climate crisis. Can you talk a little bit more about that specifically, and how these two things are, I guess, a little more linked than people might be originally aware of?
Yeah, indeed, certainly plastic pollution is a very much a part of the climate crisis, and people often do not realize that. But plastic accounts for 3.4% of the greenhouse gas emissions.
Mm,
So it's a considerable percentage there that is accounted to plastic. And uh, plastic release these gases and on each stage of their life cycle. So from extraction, well, plastics are made from fossil fuels to begin with, extraction of fossil fuels, um, transport, their refining and manufacturing, managing the plastic waste, And when plastic waste ends up in environment or oceans, they also release these gases over there in stage of their degradation. So really, at every stage of its life cycle, plastic uh, is releasing greenhouse gas emissions. So it's really connected to each other. And these emissions, as you can imagine, as I said before, plastic production is forecasted to increase, and so will the emissions, because plastics are quite in the center of climate crisis as well. So we cannot look. It's part of the same coin.
I've asked you quite a few different questions here, and I appreciate you taking the time to kind of answer all this different stuff for us. Again, this is something that I think it's a conversation that needs to be more at the forefront for people. I know that we kind of get bogged down with different news all the time. I know that I do here in the States that just really hasn't, on the grand scheme of things, it doesn't have the same kind of impact that stories like this do. I mean, plastic, for instance, is one of those things that if it goes unchecked, it's going to be an overwhelming barrier, like the longer that we kind of like leave it going the way that it currently is going. But to kind of close out this conversation, the last thing I want to ask you about is, what do you think the fix is? I know that seems like too big of a question, right? But like, let's try to find a way to solve this the best that we can in this moment. How exactly does this get solved? And I guess more importantly, what's the number one thing you want people to take from this conversation as they're, I guess, finishing off this podcast?
Well, my number one thing would be, I know all of this sounds super bad, but don't get overwhelmed, because we need to keep the eye on the prize and really do whatever it is in our sphere of influence. Whether it's just talking to people about it and spreading awareness is key. A lot of people just do not realize how bad it is, and the more we talk about it, the more people we will enable to make different choices, and that's key in solving the issue. And as Plastic Soup Foundation, we really think that not one person or not one sector can solve this problem. So it's not just only on consumers. We cannot blame consumers for all the problems. We are all in a system that is working to enable all of these things that are happening, like using single-use plastics all the time. We cannot just blame the industry. We cannot just blame the government. We all the stakeholders in these problems need to work together, and we all play a very important role in shifting the conversation and shifting the system. So um, everybody needs to take their share of responsibility and not just turn a blind eye. And whether it's just demanding more accountability from your government or making different consumer choices, because that's going to really shift the market and what's being sold. Because a lot of the time, industry or like companies are selling what is getting sold, right? In a way.
Yeah.
So if we make different choices, then we shift the demand, and we shift what kind of products are brought to the environment. And we already kind of see that, uh, getting derailed a little bit here, but in terms of cosmetics, what's happening now, there is this influx of solid products again, like soaps and solid shampoos and solid conditioners, solid creams. You can now find solid forms of products all over the market. And that's because the consumer awareness has led to those choices, and companies seeing that those kind of products are also being sold, and there is a demand for it because people want it, because people want to make sustainable choices with their money. So yeah, our wallets have great powers, and we can really uh, shift the narrative, so to speak, and yeah, make different choices, and that can really help in shifting the situation, so to speak. So yeah, for me, number one thing would be to talk and maybe share this podcast, for example, so that people really learn about, yeah, what's going on and how they can really influence it.
And honestly, I think that answers the other question as well. I mean, that is how this gets fixed, right? It gets fixed through people spreading this information, demanding more accountability, asking, like, having the, I guess, awareness that, in a time where people feel more and more powerless, like they can't really
Hmm.
affect change, our purchasing power, it's strange to say it, but it really has a monumental effect on so many different
Hmm.
things, especially in a society that seems to only care about profit. How we spend our money does have an incredible impact on decisions that are made, especially when it comes to the plastic soup in our world,
Hmm.
unfortunately. So, with that being said, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really do appreciate it. Where can people find out more about Plastic Soup Foundation online? Where can they follow you at?
We're on mostly all social media, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're all on those platforms. Our website, you can find a lot of this information on our website if you want to get deeper into one of these topics. And yeah, you can also always reach us with DMs or comments or email us, and we're very happy to answer any questions that people might have.
All right. For those who are interested, there'll be a few links in the episode description. So go ahead and check out the episode description now, and you will see those links. I want to go ahead and thank our guest, Madhuri, for coming on the show. And hopefully, we'll be able to have you back on again in the future, maybe at a different time of the day, but we'll kind of figure that out another time.
Yeah, for
If you
sure.
liked this episode, please go ahead and share it on social media: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you spend most of your time. Tag Independent Thought, tag the Plastic Soup Foundation, and we will see you in the next episode. Okay. So here we are with our third epilogue of the season here. As I mentioned in previous episodes, I'm not sure how many of these we're going to do, but we're going to just we're going to keep pushing them out until people get tired of them. That's kind of the system right now. A little more laid back, a little more casual. I want to introduce you again, but I'm afraid of messing up your name. So no, this is Madhuri Prabhakar, the experts in microplastics from the Plastic Soup Foundation. If you didn't listen to the original episode, definitely go back. It's from a few days ago on Monday. So go ahead and check that out first. Come back, listen to this episode, or do it in the reverse fashion. Doesn't really matter. There was, I mentioned this in the main episode, that I probably could have asked you so many different questions. And I wasn't sure which ones to save for this portion and which ones to put in the main one, but let me just ask the first one that is just like the elephant in the room for me. And I kind of mentioned this to you a little bit already, but when we're talking about changing the dynamics of how we use things in our world, when it comes to reducing plastic is used right now, just from my understanding, because it's cheap. And we live in a world dominated by capitalism. And the only thing that people who are capitalists seem to understand is the word more. And more is only attained through higher and higher profit margins, which means you have to use cheaper and cheaper products. How do we find a way to overcome that? What's the real, I guess, like solution here to try to overcome some of these companies who have in their minds no incentives to stop using plastic, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. uh, Big question. uh,
Yeah. I'm sorry to
yeah.
kind of like bring out the big question right away, but like it's just it's driving me
Yeah.
crazy thinking about it, because I'm just like what exactly do we need to do in order to get that to happen? Because I'm just like, these companies, I mean, they don't seem to care. I mean, when we think
Mm,
about all the effects it's having on the planet, like how much of this has all happened in like what, 100 years,
hmm.
right? I mean, what's
Absolutely.
a hundred
Yeah.
more years going to look like? And they seem to have no real regard for what's happening to all of us in the name of profit. So it almost just feels like you're fighting this battle against this behemoth, and it's just you don't really
Hmm.
know what to do.
It certainly is. It certainly is. David versus the Goliath. But yeah, I guess within the companies or just people just need to realize that we don't have infinite resources. And
Yeah.
at some point, it will run out. And at some point, we will go to the point of no return. And then there is no profit. The real profit right now is to make sure that the resources we regenerate and give them enough time to bounce back. Because if we don't do that, there's not going to be a world where we can make profit, because there is going to be no planet that's gonna uh, still provide favorable conditions for it, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, and as I mentioned in the episode as well, and it's a problem that we need to solve together. And with our consumer power, with our governments, we really need to push for legislation that de-incentivize these kind of profit making, and really push companies to watch out on their carbon footprint or their waste generation, and make them accountable for the products that they bring in the market. And that's something starting to happen now, you know, producers' responsibility. And that's something we need to, and there's different ways to do it, but yeah, it's a problem that not one person can solve, and not one sector or part of the society can solve. It's something we need to do together, and try to build pressure from as many different ways as possible. But yeah, it's again talking in the big picture
Right.
scenario. But yeah, it is quite the challenge, and it is quite overwhelming, because things don't seem to move fast enough.
No, they definitely don't. And, you know, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but it feels like a lot of this is kind of like a uniquely like American problem. Like I was mentioning, before that, and it's true for, for those who might not live in the States. I mean, we kind of have a weird political divide in the United States,
Mm.
where I'm not going to say who it is, but I think, it's pretty evident that there's just a large section of our country that feels as though they can do whatever they want, whenever they want. They don't seem to care about the consequences of anything. They're just like, I'm going to live my life and I don't care what happens. And that's how it's going to
Mhm.
be. And I struggle myself being like, I don't know how to connect with those people. I feel as though it's
Mhm.
just like this individualistic nature. It's not just about like, oh, picking myself up by my bootstraps. It's also just like, I don't want to be told how to live my life. And they just block
Mhm.
out how their actions have consequences for the rest of us who also to share a planet with those people. But am I wrong to think that this is like a uniquely American thing? I always like look over at Europe and I'm just like, that's such a progressive place. They seem to always have it under control. Like they're actually caring about the world. We're not, or you know what I'm trying to say. Or am I wrong here? Do you see some of those sentiments over where you live as well?
The short answer is also kind of yes. I don't know if it's a, again, very different societies we're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm not that familiar with the US landscape in that sense, but yeah, in Europe, there's certainly a big amount of people that are conscious in terms of climate change, or yeah, plastic pollution, so to speak. But there is, of course, also a part of society here that also doesn't want to be told how to live. I'm assuming, but uh, because I work for a nonprofit organization, I must say I probably am in a bubble where I meet those kind of like-minded people.
Right.
Um, and our supporter base as Plastic Soup Foundation are people that do care. That's why they are following us, for example, or supporting us. So sometimes I do feel like I am surrounded by that kind of bubble, but that kind of bubble does break for me every now and then when I meet people that
Yeah.
think so differently, as you mentioned. And I also get sometimes, yeah, it's kind of a shock to me, because how do I exactly connect with those people, and um, come to a shared understanding of what we need to do. And it is a challenge, but we cannot stop the conversations, for sure. We do need to keep talking about it, and hopefully slowly something clicks and change. And having that conversation is important. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I agree. Which is one of the reasons why I have this podcast, is for that
Hmm.
exact reason. I believe in the power of just speaking, I guess, maybe not speaking something into existence, but continuing to have a conversation with the hopes that it will
Hmm.
spark other people to have these conversations, to change different things, to
Mhm.
have different actions. For me, the more that I've learned about it, the more I've tried to make little changes in my life. I'm
Mhm.
one of those people who has like the canvas bags in my cars, and I have a
Yeah,
water bottle that I always use. And, we just went out and got like a glass recycling service, a composting service. We're trying to make little changes to our
exactly.
lifestyle, but I think sometimes I get caught up maybe just not knowing when I'm making the right decisions. Like I think
Hmm.
I'd mentioned to you before that I was like trying to buy this pen right here. I bought this pen because the pen said it was biodegradable. And I remember when we spoke before, you were like, oh, that's one of those terms that's a little greenwashed. And I was like, oh, no. But just can you talk to me about that really quickly here? Because I think it's one of those things like, you're trying your best to make these more conscious decisions, then you might get caught up with someone's like deceptive marketing. Like
Mm.
biodegradable, recycled, like how do these terms, I guess, kind of get manipulated against us?
Yeah, yeah. Well, as I said, that in the past years, sustainability has soared and has become the buzzword in the market, so to speak. And
Yeah.
everybody's trying to get on that bandwagon and sell as much shit as possible. That is bound to lead to these terms: biodegradable, recyclable, recycled, and less plastic, and just vague terms. And I think that's also something that we try to do at Plastic Soup Foundation with our supporter base, is to educate or make people aware of why those terms are vague and you shouldn't just take them on face value.
Yeah.
For example, biodegradable is one of those terms that are so complicated and it can be claimed so freely. Biodegradable is something that doesn't, well, okay, let me take a step back. So when we say something is biodegradable, it's a bit complicated, that's why. Um, and if it ending up in the nature as trash, doesn't mean it will biodegrade, because it might need conditions to biodegrade. And a lot of the time, biodegradable plastic is biodegradable provided it gets the optimum conditions to biodegrade. That means
Mm,
optimum temperature, optimum presence of oxygen or bacteria or microorganism that will biodegrade it. But on our planet, those optimum conditions are not in every ecosystem. So will it really biodegrade in ocean? And if it's biodegradable in ocean, will it biodegrade in soil? Because soil and ocean have very different conditions.
right.
Uh, uh, so yeah, that's why the term is just, it means nothing in that sense, because what do you mean? And if biodegradable plastic is collected properly and then taken to a facility where it can biodegrade, then it's great. But those kind of infrastructure is not existing in our in our society right now. Not on that level. There is no collection system that will take it to that facility where it will biodegrade. So it's one of those terms that's quite frustrating to see around, because it just gives you a false sense of um, that you're making the right decision, but it might not be. And same with, yeah, recyclable. Well, great, recyclable. Well, will it get recycled? Only 9% of plastic in the world gets recycled. So let's just let that sink in. So recycling is again one of those things. It's again about infrastructure getting collected, and if trash is getting in the environment, then it's out there. And recycling plastic is a very complicated process, and it's
Right.
not that easy. Uh, Plastic cannot be infinitely recycled, also. So you can recycle it two, maybe three times till it's too poor to use again in condition. So it's again one of those traps um, that makes us believe that we're making the right choice, but we need to be really mindful with those things. But not just us, the governments, for example, I'm not sure in UK or in EU, they're also looking into controlling this and making sure that they make companies accountable who claim these vague terms. You need to be able to back it up, all these claims that you make as a company, that, oh, less plastic or beautiful for the planet or the best thing that you'll ever buy that will never hurt the planet. All these kinds of claims, they need to be backed up with real facts. And that's how we need to make the companies accountable, and just not buy everything on the face value. And I think that the good thing is to ask questions. As consumers, we can be really critical about these claims and really ask questions on social media, and really ask these brands, what do they mean by certain things? Because if you get a good answer, then you know that there is some thought and facts behind it. But if it's just vague, then it's just that vague. It doesn't mean nothing.
What does vague mean? You said it a few times now. I don't think I've ever.
Vague? Oh, am I
Yeah,
pronouncing it bad?
I was like I
Vague.
don't know that I've heard that word before.
Sure, it's a very vague, as in that it's not specific, and it's
Oh,
just.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You said
Am I pronouncing it wrong? Am I
oh,
pronouncing it
vague.
wrong?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Vague.
Yeah. I thought it was a word. Okay, I'm just gonna move on. I was like, is this a word I'm not familiar with? You know,
Yeah.
I think when I was first trying to figure out exactly what questions to leave for the end here, the last question that I wrote down was about the effects that plastics having on, I guess, like the global south. You know, thinking of
Hmm.
like Indonesia, India, Sri
Hmm.
Lanka, you know, Bangladesh, all these places that, again, people in America just don't seem to ever think about. But our plastic waste is just floating across the Pacific, going over into some of these countries. And I think you had mentioned before that like people were like using some of this stuff to like eat out of, and just, I mean, I couldn't imagine the countless like health effects that probably come from being constantly bombarded with all this pollution. You know, I mean, who knows what people are dealing with, how much cancer is going on because of all of this. I mean,
Hmm.
what are some of your thoughts on this? I mean, as far as the I guess like the real like health effects that it's having on millions of people like around the world from having to constantly just be around that toxicity all the time.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a big issue, I must say, because oftentimes also here in the Netherlands, I'm from India originally.
Yeah.
And when I sometimes tell people about, oh, what do you do for work? Oh, I work for the Plastic Soup Foundation and we fight plastic pollution. Really? Here? You wanna, isn't India more polluted? Shouldn't you be solving the problem there?
Yeah,
That's
where's the
what
trash
sometimes
coming from?
sometimes that's the response that I get. And I'm like
Yeah.
so infuriated with that comment, that it's just people just don't realize, because streets are clean here, but all our trash is sold and exported to come to countries like Malaysia and Indonesia and India.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, we're just basically throwing our problems there and blaming them
For
for
being
it,
dirty
and
or
for being
yeah.
dirty or polluted or polluting the rivers and the oceans, which is just so unfair. It's just unfair because those countries don't have the infrastructure to to basically solve the waste problem of the entire world.
Yeah.
Um, it's just US and Japan and the Netherlands are some of the big exporters of plastic waste to these countries.
Mm.
So the problem is very much here, and we just send our waste when it's not in our sight, not our problem, kind of mentality. And not just that they are not able to properly manage that waste. There are so many problems arising on a societal levels over there, because the waste is often mishandled there and burnt in open. And plastic and or e-waste or other these kind of electronic waste or plastic waste, if it's burned in open, the amount of toxins and fumes that go in the air
That's
is
basically just
just
cancer. Like it like very quickly. That'll be just cancer.
there are so many carcinogenic substances released in the air. And uh, there was a study that came, I think, in 2021 that really took me aback, because they analyzed about like 36 eggs from 14 countries that import plastic waste,
Yeah.
and they are free range chickens. right? The eggs from the free-range chickens that were in the vicinity of these waste hotspots where plastic is burned openly or used as fuel to cook their food. Uh, and those laid eggs had those dioxins in them, in the eggs of the chicken. It blew my mind. I couldn't believe that that was even possible, because what happens is these harmful substances, they accumulate in the fat of animal products like meat and fish and eggs, for
Yeah.
example. So it's just there's so many people at risk there because of this mishandle of waste and open burning. It's just, yeah, we live in a very unfair world, and that story really hit me hard. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
It's unsustainable.
it
It
is,
really is.
and
Like there's no getting around it. It's unsustainable. I had someone come on my podcast a few months ago. Someone who was in the US Navy, went over to Iraq, was exposed to the burn pits they had over there, where they were throwing anything and everything in those burn pits. And he was there for less than a year and he got cancer.
wow.
Just he got cancer and he got a movement disorder from it. And he's going to be stuck with these issues for the rest of his life. And he has all of his health care taken care of by the US government. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He still has these like issues that he deals
Yeah.
with every day, just lots of chronic pain. I mean, and that's somebody who has access to healthcare and wasn't exposed
Hmm.
to it for that long, you know?
Hmm.
How is it affecting people who have no access to healthcare and they are
Hmm.
prolonged exposure, years and years and years with no end in sight? I mean, and that's not even talking about the air pollution that comes from like some of the countries that are down there. Probably again, pollution that, it's also coming back to the fossil fuel industry, right? It's, I mean, and in all ways, it kind of all ties together. But yeah, I think I'm going to end this
Yeah.
conversation the way I began it, with it just being, when we're talking about corporations who only care about profit, like that needs to change. It needs to change,
Hmm.
because that seems to be the byproduct of all this, because profit was cared about above all else. All of these repercussions are now happening to so many different people's lives. And again, this has been what, 100 years, maybe, I mean,
Hmm.
we've
Hmm.
irrevocably like wrecked our planet in a century.
Hmm.
It
So
feels
yeah.
it feels unbelievable. Truly, it really does. um Madhuri, thank you for so much for coming on the podcast today, speaking with me about this, in two different conversations, the original episode and now here with the epilogue. For those who didn't listen to the original episode, could you just tell us one more time, like where we can find Plastic Soup online, how people can get more involved, learning about all of this?
Yeah, well, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, where and all those places. Please visit our website if you want to learn about any of these topics that we mentioned today. We have a lot of information on our website where you can learn about this topic. Um, yeah, and you can always email us and DM us, or we're very happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show again today. For those who are interested, those links will be in the episode description. If you like this episode, please go ahead and share it on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you spend most of your time at. Apparently, even on LinkedIn, which I wasn't sure that people still use that, but Plastic Soup Foundation is on LinkedIn. So,
It's a thing in Europe for sure. A lot of people use.
so on LinkedIn as well. But thank you so much again for everyone who listened to this episode, and we will see you in the next one.